Old age comes as an inevitable stage in life's journey, and with it come questions that few want to face, such as where is the best place to live, whether one should remain independent, live with children, or accept the reality of a nursing home. These questions have no easy answers, because they involve much more than just physical space. They are decisions about dignity, solitude, freedom, and expectations that are often not met. Schopenhauer said that illusion is the source of all human suffering. Many enter old age believing that it will be a period of care and recognition for the years devoted to family, but the reality may be different. The truth is that being with children doesn't always bring the comfort you expect. Independence can be lonelier than it seems, and nursing homes, despite their stigma, can offer a better quality of life than an unattended home. In light of this, what's the best choice? How to live your old age without becoming a burden, but also without feeling forgotten. The idea of aging close to your children is a dream of comfort and security for many. After many years of dedication to family, this stage of life is expected to be marked by mutuality, care, and constant presence. But the reality can be quite different. Schopenhauer said that family ties are formed out of necessity, not eternal gratitude. Children, as they grow up, build their own routines, take on responsibilities, create their own families, and face everyday challenges. Although love remains, the time available to parents becomes scarce. Living with children does not necessarily mean that there is a need for company. In many cases, this coexistence brings more disappointments than joys. The expectation of constant attention can be shattered by the fast pace of modern life, and what seemed like an opportunity to bond turns into a feeling of alienation. When an older person moves into a children's home, they begin to share a space that already has an established dynamic. Small differences in lifestyle become apparent. Routines, habits, preferences, and even small quirks can clash. While children have their work commitments and grandchildren are immersed in the digital world, older adults feel like they occupy an undefined space between nostalgia for the past and a lack of belonging in the present. It is not uncommon for an elderly person to feel isolated even within the same home. Conversations are interrupted, family dinners become rushed moments, and gestures and cares give way to the bustle of everyday life. Gower warned that expecting too much from others is a sure path to disappointment. This disappointment stems from a gap between expectation and reality, a chasm that can become more apparent in interactions between older parents and adult children. One older woman, facing health challenges, decided to accept her daughter's invitation to live with her. At first, the idea seemed ideal: closeness, support, and a chance to strengthen family ties. In the first days, everything seemed promising. There was a sense of warmth and confidence that she would not have to face old age alone. However, over time, the routine of the house revealed an unpleasant truth. The daughter left early and returned late from work, always tired. The son-in-law was often polite, avoided long conversations, preferring the silence of the TV or mobile phone. Her grandchildren, absorbed in the virtual world, barely noticed her presence. Even surrounded by people, the old woman found herself immersed in an unexpected loneliness. During the day, she spent hours in silence, without anyone to talk to. The interactions were brief and superficial, limited to questions about her health or requests for help with small household chores. One day, while trying to start a conversation, she heard her daughter say, "Mom, I can't right now, I'm very busy." This phrase, spoken without the intention of offending, sounded like a reminder that reality was different from what she had imagined. She realized then that living with a family did not mean being a part of their lives. The house was not hers, the schedule was not hers, and her presence, no matter how unnoticeable, always seemed like an add-on to someone else's daily routine. Schopenhauer's lesson is clear. Don't look to your family for a source of permanent happiness. Children's love doesn't disappear, but their priorities change. Relying solely on this coexistence for company and attention can be a painful illusion. Independence, even partial, can be a wiser choice. Having your own space, even if it's close to family, allows you to maintain autonomy without creating unrealistic expectations. After all, being close doesn't necessarily mean being together, and there are few things more lonely than feeling like a stranger in your own home. Old age brings a difficult dilemma. On the one hand, there is a desire to maintain autonomy, to continue making one's own decisions and living without relying on others. On the other hand, there is a fear of loneliness, isolation, and lack of support when it is most needed. Schopenhauer warned that the less we depend on others, the less we become disillusioned by their limitations. Dependency inevitably brings with it expectations and the risk of disappointment. However, living entirely alone can be disturbing, especially when health begins to require more care. In light of this, there is a middle ground that can balance these extremes: living alone but close to family. This arrangement allows the elderly to maintain their individuality and routine while having support available when needed. It is not only where we live that matters, but also how we build this new stage of life, finding a way that allows us to maintain dignity without giving up emotional comfort. Living with children can mean giving up your privacy and adapting to other people's schedules. Living in a nursing home can be seen as the final step toward dependency, while living alone requires planning and, above all, a state of mind that values one's own company. The important question is not only whether independence is possible, but also whether it can be comfortable. Many older people fear isolation, but they forget that true loneliness is not the absence of people, but the absence of meaning. Schopenhauer saw solitude as a refuge for those who understand the nature of human relationships. He argued that it is often better to be alone than to be surrounded by superficial and tedious interactions. After all, how many people live surrounded by relatives and yet feel lonely? For independence to work, an older person needs to reconnect with themselves. Create a routine that includes pleasant habits, establish small social obligations, and accept that life at any age needs its own meaning. One elderly man faced the difficult decision of where to spend the remaining years of his life after the death of his wife. His son offered him a room in his house, but he hesitated. He didn't want to be a burden, and above all, he didn't want to feel like his life depended on the goodwill of others. So he found a solution, renting a small apartment a few blocks away from his son. That way he could continue his routine without interfering with the family's life, but with the peace of mind of knowing that if something happened, help would be there. At first, the decision brought doubt. The nights seemed longer, and the lack of someone to share food with weighed on him. But over time, he noticed something unexpected. Being alone was not a punishment, but an opportunity. Now he woke up at the time he wanted, cooked his meals at his own pace, and spent more time reading and walking. He could visit his son and grandchildren whenever he wanted without feeling like he was intruding on a space that wasn't his. Schopenhauer argued that life becomes easier when we stop fighting what we can't change. With this choice, the older man realized that old age did not have to be a burden or a regret. It was just another phase, and he was ready to live it with dignity. The main lesson that the search for independence teaches is that being alone does not always mean being lonely. Old age can be a time of reflection and freedom if you learn to appreciate it without unrealistic expectations. Having your own space, not being directly dependent on your children, allows you to maintain a sense of identity and autonomy. Schopenhauer said that the greatest happiness comes from being enough for yourself. Independence, when possible, is not isolation but a gift. It allows an older person to live by his or her own rules without feeling that he or she must conform to the demands of others. More than a practical matter, this choice is an attitude toward life. Accept that freedom at any age remains one of the most valuable things one can have. When it comes to nursing homes, the first thing that comes to mind for many older people is abandonment. The idea of being left alone, away from family, with no control over one's life, evokes fear and resistance. After all, for centuries family culture has emphasized that parents should care for their children until the end of their lives. But does this view make sense? Is every nursing home a byword for oblivion? Or can it, in some cases, represent a new opportunity to live well? Schopenhauer said, "What matters is not the place where we live, but the quality of life we lead in it." Much of the resistance to nursing homes comes from the romanticization of their relationship with their parents, from the destruction of their relationship with their parents, from the destruction of their relationship with their families, from the destruction of their relationship with their parents. Children work, grandchildren have their own routines, and the elderly often spend more time than the parents. Then there is the issue of health. Caring for an elderly person requires dedication and knowledge that many relatives, no matter how well they intend, cannot offer. Over time, these relationships can become exhausting for both parties, turning what should be loving care into quiet time. In a good nursing home, a person can find companionship, security, and meaningful activities. Instead of feeling like a burden to the family, they begin to live in an environment that contributes to their quality of life. One elderly man always rejected the idea of going to a nursing home. For him, it was the last step before being forgotten, a sign that he was no longer important to anyone. For many years, he lived alone in his home. The children came to see him on weekends, but most of the time they were busy with their own things. During the week, his routine was monotonous. He got up, made coffee, watched TV, and waited for the phone to ring, which didn't always happen. Over time, his health began to deteriorate. Little lapses in judgment, difficulty in performing simple tasks, and constant fatigue led his children to insist that he try living in a nursing home. Reluctantly, but without options, he agreed. Upon arrival, his first impression was negative. He felt out of place, as if he really was in a space waiting for the end of life. However, as the days passed, something amazing happened. He found that he was no longer alone. There were other people his age, with similar stories, willing to talk and share experiences. He began to participate in events. He once again enjoyed board games, walks in the fresh air, and even the little trips organized by the institution. Moreover, he met an old childhood friend who, coincidentally, was also there. Their conversations became an important part of his routine, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something. Schopenhauer warned that suffering comes from resistance to change. Accepting reality can be liberating. This older man realized that the problem was not revenge, but how he perceived the situation. The main lesson of this story is that the fear of change can be much worse than the change itself. Of course, not all nursing homes are the same. Some really do not offer the care and attention that an elderly person deserves, which makes choosing a suitable place with good conditions and a welcoming atmosphere necessary. But this also applies to any other decision in old age. The quality of life always depends on the context and the people around you. Schopenhauer said that illusions often lock us in more than the circumstances themselves. The main mistake is not in choosing a nursing home, but in insisting on an ideal that no longer corresponds to reality. What is really important is for each person to evaluate their circumstances and make a decision that will allow them to live with dignity, safety and, above all, without regrets. Time passes, children grow up and parents age. For years, many parents devote their lives to raising, educating, and protecting their children, believing that one day this effort will be rewarded. The dream is to live to old age and be able to count on the gratitude and care of those for whom they have done so much. But reality does not always live up to this expectation. Many older adults feel forgotten, ignored, and even unfairly mistreated by their children. Time that was once devoted to them now seems insignificant. Visits become rare, conversations are rushed. The feeling of loneliness grows, as does resentment. However, Schopenhauer warned that the relationship between parents and children is a biological contract, not a bond of eternal debt. Children do not choose when they are born, and as adults they inevitably lead their own lives, just as their parents once did. The idea that children should repay all the care they receive is an expectation built by parents, not a universal rule of life. The problem is not the love of children, but the illusion that gratitude will be shown constantly and unconditionally. The expectation of recognition and attention can be the root of great disappointments. Time transforms relationships. When children are small, parents are the center of their world. But as they grow older, new priorities emerge: career, relationships, children, personal challenges. The attention that was previously focused on parents is now dissipated. This does not mean that there is no love, but the pace of modern life and new responsibilities are distancing children from their parents, even if this is not conscious. For older people, this distance may seem abandoned. For children, it is simply a natural continuation of life. Schopenhauer said that human suffering is born of expectation. Those who expect too much from others are always disappointed. And perhaps the greatest illusion of parents is that they believe that children will always be ready to offer the same level of care and attention that they received in childhood. The cycle of life is not based on reimbursement, but on transmission. Just as parents once withdrew from their own parents to build their own lives, children are now doing the same. The mistake is not that children become distant, but in the belief that they should act differently. One woman dedicated her entire life to her children. She worked, cared, gave up her own dreams so that they could live better. She never complained about the sacrifices because she believed that in the future they would be there for her, making up for all that love. When old age came, she expected attention, constant visits, maybe even an invitation to live with one of them. But what she found was this silence. The children loved her, but they were too busy. The calls were quick, the visits rare. When they came, they brought a sense of urgency and commitment. She tried to talk, to tell stories, but she felt like no one was really listening. She once told one of the children that she missed the days when they were kids, when they would spend the whole day together. The son, not realizing the weight of these words, answered with a smile, "Mom, life goes on, doesn't it? Now I have to take care of my family." At that moment she realized what she had never realized: no one had abandoned her. She simply expected from children what they could not give, Schopenhauer said. Most human suffering comes from waiting. Those who learn not to wait suffer less. It was hard to accept, but she realized that the gratitude she had been waiting for would not come the way she had imagined. And that maybe it's time to learn to live for yourself. The greatest lesson that old age can teach is that no one owes anything. Children never stop loving their parents, but their love is different from the love their parents feel for them. While parents see their children as their greatest achievement, children need to move forward by creating their own stories. Those who enter old age expecting recognition and gratitude may end up drowning in resentment and loneliness. Schopenhauer said that wisdom lies in accepting life as it is, not as we wish it were. Old age should not be a period of complaining about gratitude that never comes, but rather a moment of liberation. Let go of expectations of what others should do, and learn to live your life with greater ease and fewer demands. Old age comes to everyone, but not everyone knows how to accept it. Some perceive it as a period of decline, a time of loss and limitations. Others try to resist, denying its arrival, as if fighting time is the solution. But there are those who find new meaning in old age, the opportunity to live with greater wisdom and fewer expectations. Schopenhauer said that the secret to a peaceful old age is to accept reality as it is, without illusions. Suffering, as a rule, does not come from age itself, but from struggling with what cannot be changed. Many older people live in anxiety because they expect something from others: attention, recognition, care. However, happiness does not lie in expectations from children, family, or society. It lies in what we can do for ourselves. Old age can be lonely, but being surrounded by people does not always mean true companionship. Many relationships are superficial, sustained more by convention than by genuine affection. There are those who live surrounded by family but still feel deeply lonely. For some, living with children will be a path of comfort and closeness. For others, solitude will be easier than forced companionship. The important thing is not to follow an ideal model, but to find a balance between what is desired and what is possible. Schopenhauer warns us of the dangers of emotional dependency. The more one relies on others to find meaning in life, the more vulnerable one becomes to rejection and disappointment. Therefore, the most important thing in old age is not the company of others, but the dignity of remaining master of oneself. Embracing old age also means freeing yourself from the guilt of living for yourself. Many older people go through this stage trying to please their children, fearing they will be an abuser, and suppressing their own desires. But what is the point of spending your entire life devoting yourself to others, only to reach old age and continue to be bound by that obligation? Schopenhauer argued that a person finds true peace when he learns to live for himself. If we cannot change others, we can change our outlook on life. And old age can be, yes, a period of freedom. The freedom to say no to what does not make sense. To avoid places where you are not welcome. To choose your own companions and respect your own rhythms. After all, age does not deprive you of the right to want to be happy. On the contrary, it should make this desire even stronger. Old age should not be a time of waiting. Waiting for children to come, for someone to call, for attention to come. Time does not stand still, and waiting for recognition or company may be the quickest way to resentment. Schopenhauer teaches us that peace comes from liberation. Letting go of expectations of what others owe you and focusing on what you can do for yourself. Everyone must find their own path in old age. Some will choose to live with children, others will seek independence, and still others may find solace in solitude. None of these options are wrong if they are conscious choices and not forced upon you. The key is to maintain your dignity. Continue to live with autonomy, not allowing the weight of the past or disappointed expectations to define the present. Because, after all, old age is not the end of life. It is just another chapter, and it is up to each person to decide how they want to write it. Old age is a topic surrounded by doubts, fears, and expectations. For some, it's a time of solitude and introspection. For others, it's a time to bond with family, to enjoy the bonds built over a lifetime. But ultimately, each person has their own way of experiencing this stage. The central question remains, what's the best way to age? Living in a community. People, even if the company is not always what we would like. Or to maintain independence, even if it means facing loneliness. At some moments, this choice does not have a single answer. The experience of old age is shaped by our choices, but also by what is beyond our control. We can decide where to live, who to associate with, how to spend our time. But we cannot control how others feel, or force anyone to give us more attention than they can or want to offer. That's why Schopenhauer teaches us that happiness should not depend on the presence of others, but on the ability to find meaning in one's own existence. Each person sees old age differently, and you prefer to live surrounded by people, even if communication has its difficulties, or you believe that independence is the safest way to preserve dignity. Share your opinion in the comments. Your perspective can help others think through this important choice. And for more stories and reflections like this, subscribe, like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. Take care of yourself. See you later.